The letter that shattered Jonathan Roumie wasn't written by a director, a theologian, or even a fan of The Chosen. It was scrawled on torn notebook paper by a homeless man named Charlie, a man Jonathan thought he'd never see again. And when Roumie finally read those words, alone in his prayer room on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the actor who brings Jesus to life on screen couldn't stop the tears from falling. What Charlie revealed in that letter about faith, forgiveness, and a secret he'd been carrying would break Jonathan's heart wide open. But it was the final line, the one Charlie wrote just hours before he died, that would change everything Roumie thought he knew about his purpose. The envelope sat on the table in front of him, yellowed and fragile. His hands trembled as he reached for it. He had no idea that inside those folded pages was a truth so powerful it would redefine his entire understanding of what it means to play Jesus, and what it means to actually be like him. If you've ever wondered whether your small acts of kindness truly matter, stay with this story until the end. You won't believe what Charlie's letter revealed. It started 3 years ago, on a cold morning in Los Angeles. Jonathan had just finished an early call time for The Chosen and stopped at a small coffee shop on his way home. That's when he saw him, a man sitting alone on a bench outside, wrapped in an old military jacket, his breath visible in the winter air. Most people walked past without a second glance. But something made Jonathan stop. The man wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't asking for money. He was just sitting there, staring at the sky like he was searching for something he'd lost a long time ago. Jonathan felt a pull in his chest, quiet, but undeniable. He went back inside, ordered a second coffee, and walked over to the bench. "Mind if I sit?" Jonathan asked. The man looked up, surprised. His eyes were tired but kind. "It's a free country," he said with a slight smile. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the man spoke. "You're him, aren't you? The guy who plays Jesus?" Jonathan nodded. "I am. My name's Jonathan." "Charlie," the man said, extending a weathered hand. "I don't want anything from you if that's what you're thinking. Just wanted to say what you're doing matters. More than you know." Jonathan handed him the coffee. "It's black. Hope that's okay." Charlie took it with both hands, like it was something precious. "Black's perfect." That was the beginning. What Jonathan didn't know was that Charlie had been a pastor once, before everything fell apart. But that part of the story was still hidden. Keep watching to find out what Charlie was really running from. Over the next year and a half, their Tuesday meetings became something Jonathan looked forward to more than he expected. He would bring 2 coffees, both black, and they would sit on that bench and talk. Charlie never asked for money. Never asked for anything really. He just listened. And when he spoke, his words carried a weight that Jonathan couldn't ignore. They talked about faith, about doubt, about what it means to truly see another person in a world that trains us to look away. Charlie would quote scripture sometimes, not like someone showing off, but like someone who had lived inside those words and knew their edges, sharp and comforting at the same time. "You ever feel like you're carrying something too heavy?" Charlie asked one morning, his voice quiet. Jonathan thought about the pressure of playing Jesus, the expectation, the criticism, the weight of trying to honor something sacred. "Yeah," he admitted. "All the time." Charlie nodded slowly. "That's when you know you're doing it right. If it didn't weigh anything, it wouldn't mean anything." Jonathan learned that Charlie slept under an overpass. That he'd lost people he loved. That he'd made mistakes he couldn't take back. But Charlie never seemed bitter. Just tired. Like he'd been walking a long road and was finally okay with where it led. Then one Tuesday, Charlie wasn't there. Jonathan waited. Brought 2 coffees anyway just in case. But the bench stayed empty. Where did Charlie go? Jonathan had no idea that the answer would come in the most heartbreaking way possible. Stay with me, you need to hear what happens next. Weeks turned into months. Jonathan kept coming back to that bench, hoping. He asked other people on the streets if they'd seen Charlie. Checked with nearby shelters. Even called a few hospitals. Nothing. The not knowing was the worst part. Was Charlie okay? Had he moved to another part of the city? Or had something happened? Something Jonathan didn't want to imagine? He felt a weight settle in his chest, guilt mixed with grief. Maybe he should have done more. Maybe he should have insisted Charlie take his number, or offered him a place to stay. Maybe those coffees and conversations weren't enough. The bench felt emptier than it should have. Jonathan still brought 2 coffees for a while, out of habit, out of hope. But eventually he stopped. And life moved on. Filming, interviews, travel. The role of Jesus continued to demand everything he had. But in quiet moments, Jonathan would think about Charlie and wonder if he'd ever know what happened to him. Then, one spring afternoon, there was a knock on his door. That knock would bring the answer Jonathan had been searching for, but it would come wrapped in sorrow. What he was about to discover would break him. Don't stop now. Jonathan opened the door to find a woman in her 50s, holding a small cardboard box. Her eyes were gentle but carried the heaviness of someone who had seen too much loss. "Are you Jonathan Roumie?" she asked. "I am. My name is Rosa. I work at a hospice downtown." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm here because of Charlie." Jonathan's heart dropped. "Is he?" "I'm sorry," Rosa said softly. "He passed away about 2 weeks ago." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Jonathan steadied himself against the doorframe. Rosa continued, her voice kind but steady. "He talked about you a lot in his final days. About the coffee. About the bench. He wanted you to have this." She held out the box. Jonathan took it, his hands unsteady. "Thank you for bringing it." Rosa nodded. "He was a good man. I think he was waiting to make peace before he let go." After she left, Jonathan stood in his living room, staring at the box. He could feel his pulse in his throat. Slowly, he carried it to his small prayer room, a quiet space with a single window where he often sat in silence before early morning shoots. He set the box on the floor and knelt beside it. Inside, he found 3 things. An old military jacket with a faded 82nd Airborne patch. A small wooden cross, hand-carved from what looked like a popsicle stick, rough around the edges but made with care. And a sealed plastic bag protecting a single piece of folded notebook paper. On the outside, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "For Jonathan." This was it. The letter that would break everything open. But what Charlie wrote inside, no one could have prepared Jonathan for that. "Keep watching. You have to hear these words." Jonathan's hands shook as he unfolded the letter. The handwriting was uneven, like it had been written by someone whose body was failing but whose will was still strong. He began to read. And with every line, something inside him cracked open. "Jonathan, brother, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Don't feel bad that you didn't find me. I was hiding, not from you, but from shame. I need you to know something. I wasn't always like this. I used to stand behind a pulpit. I used to have all the answers. My wife, Sarah, used to sit in the front row every Sunday with our daughter, and I thought I had it all figured out. I thought faith was something you controlled, something you could build a life on if you just tried hard enough. Then Sarah got sick. And no amount of prayer, no amount of faith, no amount of begging God changed it. She died in my arms, and when she did, every answer I ever gave from that pulpit died with her. I blamed God. I blamed myself. I drank until the church was gone. Until my daughter stopped calling. Until I had nothing left but the streets and the shame of knowing I'd lost everything that mattered. But those Tuesdays with you, brother, you gave me something back. Not my old life. Something better. You reminded me that Jesus actually sees people like me. Not the ones who have it together, Not the ones in the front row. The broken ones. The ones who fell too far to climb back. You didn't preach at me. You didn't try to fix me. You just sat with me. You brought me coffee that was always too hot, and you treated me like I was still worth something. I've been watching your show, Jonathan. Someone at the shelter has a phone, and we watch it when we can. When I see you playing him, I see what you gave me on that bench. Compassion without pity. Love without conditions. That's the real Jesus. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm ready to see Sarah again. And Jesus, the real one. Tell my daughter, if you ever find her, that I'm sorry. That I loved her every single day, even when I couldn't be the father she needed. That cross I made you? I carved it from a piece of wood I found near our bench. The same bench where you reminded me I wasn't invisible. Don't stop what you're doing, Jonathan. People need to see Jesus the way you showed me. Gentle, present, real. Your brother in Christ, I can say that again. Charlie. That coffee? Always too hot. But I never told you because I didn't want you to stop coming. The letter fell from Jonathan's hands. He sat there on the floor of his prayer room, tears streaming down his face, unable to move. Charlie had been a pastor, a man of faith who lost everything. And Jonathan had no idea. All those Tuesdays, he thought he was just being kind. Just sitting with someone who needed company. But to Charlie, it was everything. It was proof that he still mattered. That he was still seen. Jonathan pressed his palms to his face and wept. This is the moment that changed Jonathan forever. But Charlie's letter held one more secret, a daughter who never knew her father died. What happens next will restore your faith in redemption. Stay until the end. 3 days later, Jonathan made a decision. He couldn't bring Charlie back, but he could honor his final wish. He reached out to Rosa and asked if there were any records, any way to find Charlie's daughter. It took time. Phone calls. Dead ends. But eventually, Rosa found a name in the hospice intake file, Grace. Grace lived in San Diego. She was a teacher. And according to the records, she hadn't spoken to her father in over a decade. Jonathan didn't know if she even knew Charlie had died. He wasn't sure if reaching out was the right thing to do. But the letter burned in his chest, and he knew he had to try. He called her. The conversation was brief, tense. Grace was silent for a long time when Jonathan explained who he was and why he was calling. "My father's dead," she finally said, her voice hollow. "I'm so sorry," Jonathan said gently. "He passed a few weeks ago. But he left something for you. A letter. And I think, if you're willing, I'd like to bring it to you." There was a long pause. "Okay," she whispered. Jonathan drove to San Diego not knowing if this would bring healing or more pain. But what happened when Grace read her father's words? You have to see this through to the end. They met in a small cafe near the coast. Grace was in her early 30s, with her father's eyes, tired, but searching. Jonathan handed her the letter without saying much. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. And then she read. Her hands began to shake. Tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. She covered her mouth, her shoulders trembling. When she finished, she looked up at Jonathan, her face completely undone. "I thought he forgot about me," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought the drinking erased me. That I didn't matter anymore." "You mattered," Jonathan said quietly. "Every single day. He told me that." Grace held the letter to her chest and cried, deep, full-body sobs that carried years of grief, anger, and something like relief. "I don't know if I can forgive him yet," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "But this is a start." Jonathan handed her the wooden cross. "He made this. For me. But I think it belongs with you." Grace took it, running her fingers over the rough edges. "He used to carve things when I was little," she whispered. "I forgot that." They sat in silence for a while. Then Grace looked at Jonathan and said, "Thank you for seeing him, for treating him like he still mattered." "He did matter," Jonathan said, "more than I realized. What started as a tragedy became something else, something redemptive. But there's one more part to this story. One more moment that will bring it all full circle. Don't leave yet." A few weeks later, Jonathan returned to the bench. He brought one coffee this time, his own. He sat there in the afternoon light, thinking about Charlie, about Grace, about all the people we walk past every day without really seeing. He realized something that day: playing Jesus on screen mattered. But it didn't matter more than those Tuesdays. It didn't matter more than the coffee, the conversation, the presence. Charlie didn't need Jonathan to be perfect. He just needed him to show up. And maybe that's what all of us need, to be seen. To be reminded that we're not invisible. That we still matter, even when we feel like we've lost everything. Jonathan looked down at his phone and saw a text from Grace. "I visited his grave today. I'm not okay yet, but I'm getting there. Thank you for bringing him back to me." He smiled through the ache in his chest. Charlie was gone. But his story wasn't over. It was still rippling outward, still changing lives. And maybe that's the real miracle, not the grand moments, but the quiet ones. The ones that happen on a bench, over coffee, between two people who took the time to see each other. Looking back, Jonathan realized that his life had been quietly divided into two chapters, before Charlie and after. The actor who had spent years trying to portray Jesus perfectly now understood that perfection was never the point. Presence was. Charlie didn't need someone with all the answers. He needed someone who would sit with him, who would bring him coffee that was always too hot, who would treat him like he still existed. And in doing that, Jonathan had done exactly what Jesus would have done. So as you finish watching the story, maybe ask yourself, who is your Charlie? Who have you been walking past without seeing? Whose story are you missing because you're too busy, too distracted, too afraid? Because the truth is, we all have a Charlie. Someone waiting to be noticed. Someone who needs to know they still matter. What would happen if you stopped? If you sat down? If you brought the coffee? You might just change a life. Or discover that your own life was the one being changed all along. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories of unexpected grace. And in the comments below, tell us, who is your Charlie? Let's honor the people who taught us what it really means to love.